is on OD from the Founders to the Future. I see many people joining us this morning. Kimberly and I are going to be moderating the webinar today. So we will look for your participation in the chat room. Feel free to chat and ask questions with each other and to Matt. Kimberly and I will join in and field your questions with Matt, and at select times in Matt's presentation today, he will turn it over and engage you all in questions. And at times, Kimberly or I may actually turn the video on for you to ask the question directly to Matt. And for those of you joining on the phone, we'll turn on your mic so that you can actually participate via phone. So with that said, please welcome Kimberly Barker and Professor Matt Minahan.
Thank you, Quang. Quang, first of all, I want to thank you for being the best co-host ever.
You're welcome. Likewise.
Before we begin today, let's get a sense of where in the world our participants are. So if you could put in the chat room where you are, we'll just shout out a few just to get a sense of where you are. I see New York, Tampa, Florida, Chicago, San Francisco, Paris, France. Cape Town, South Africa. Canada. Seattle, Minnesota. So thank you.
ISODC.
Yes. Thank you very much, everyone. Also, if you could just take a moment and share in the chat room, what perspective do you bring today? I'm a scholar practitioner. What perspective are you bringing with you today? So I see OD student, IT manager who's working on their master's in IT. Stan is a past, present, and future disruptor of OD. OD consultant, PhD student, several consultants, workplace environment designer, student. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. It's just really helpful to know what perspective you're bringing. On behalf of the International Society, Quang, do you hear that noise? Okay. If it's okay, if you can mute your microphone, at least in the time being, that would be very helpful. Those who are listening in. On behalf of the International Society for Organization Development and Change, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar with the one and only Dr. Matt Minahan.
There better only be one.
Oh, I encourage you to check out the International Society for Organization Development and Change, or ISODC, at isodc.org. This amazing group of international, collaborative, and dedicated individuals are trying to make the world a better place at all levels, and we need your help to do this. Membership is a great deal, and you get so many benefits from the organization. If you are a full-time registered student at a college or university, membership is also free. So please check us out today at isodc.org. Dr. Matt Minahan has worked for more than 35 years helping organizations build capacity, and he is only 40 years old. He is one of the kindest, smartest, and most genuine people you will ever meet. His class in my doctoral program was one of my favorites. He works with senior executives, teams on enterprise-wide change programs to meet new business challenges in their external and internal environments, to develop new business strategies and redesign their organizations from the bottom to the top. Matt's work includes collaborative design and facilitation of strategic planning, organization design, organization structure, leadership development, communications, business process simplification, and culture change. You do everything, don't you, Matt? These programs often include action research-based interviews and focus groups and frank assessments by the organization of its strengths and weaknesses, shareholder analysis, external benchmarking, and work on alignment among the organization's business strategy, values, mission, and leadership philosophy. Matt has served on the board of trustees of the Organization Development and Network for 7 years, including as vice chair, co-chair, and chair. He is also an active volunteer and former board member, both of NTL and the Chesapeake Bay OD Network, as well as being an executive in institutional change and strategy at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. Matt completed his doctorate at the George Washington University in OD. He holds adjunct faculty appointments in the doctorate in strategic leadership program at Philadelphia University and in the MSOD program in the School of Public Affairs at American University in Washington, D.C.
Oh no, we can generate that because we have to generate it.
If you could, if you're listening in, if you could please mute your microphone, that would be wonderful. Matt is also a visiting scholar at Benedictine University, Cabrini University, and several other doctoral programs. Welcome, Dr. Matt Minahan.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the invitation, Kimberly, and also Quang, and certainly thrilled to be here with all of you today on behalf of the ISODC. I got to say, of all of the OD organizations out there, this one has a unique space that nobody else is in, particularly focused on research and scholars and doctoral students and graduates. And so if you're not a member, I highly encourage you to join. In the winter edition, which is coming out soon, of the OD Journal, my colleague Russ Forrester and I have an article on use of self, a brand new kind of architecture for use of self and a new approach to thinking about use of self. And so I'm told by Roland Sullivan, the editor, that the focus of the issue is going to be on Edie and Charlie Seashore. And so we wrote our piece and did our research with that in mind. So if you're not already a member of ISODC, become one and have access to the OD Journal and hopefully be interested in what it is we had to say. So glad you're all here. Let me just kind of get us started here by our topic here is OD from the founders to the future. Just want to begin by being clear about what I do and why I do it. So my mission here is to reduce the gap between the human condition and human potential. And so looking out to those far mountains is where I think we all want to be as individuals and as a society. And in all the work that I do, the coaching, the org design, the strategy work, in my job as a teacher, my job as a university professor, and my job as a father and a husband, that's my mission here, is to help create the human condition in the most positive way we can imagine. So I want to begin with just a little bit of concept here. Our species, we think of ourselves as Homo sapiens, but in fact, our species is Homo sapiens sapiens. So we are the species that knows Homo sapiens, and knows that it knows. So this metacognitive capacity about knowing how we know, learning how we learn, is a higher order thinking that enables us to understand and analyze and take control of our own cognitive processes, especially when engaged in learning. And that's one of the big things that differentiates us from all other beings in the animal kingdom. It also helps us bring awareness and understanding of our own thinking and cognitive processes and thinking about our thinking. So when we think about the founders and the world in which they were working, their work in the 1930s and the 1940s and the 1950s looked a lot like this.
All right, girls, listen carefully. This is the wrapping department. Now, the candy will pass by on this conveyor belt and continue into the next room where the girls will pack it. Now, your job is to take each piece of candy and wrap it in one of these papers and then put it back on the belt. You understand? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Let her roll! Let her roll! Wait here. Somebody's asleep in the...
So let's fast forward a little bit. And we can see the folly of the folly of the org design, the folly of the business process, the folly of the assembly line. And it speaks to, it's funny every time I see it. It speaks to a philosophy about the role of the human being in society and the role of the human being in the organization. Here's another even more grim depiction of that same theme from the 1930s by Charlie Chaplin. He's working on an assembly line here and can't quite keep up and works harder and harder. And now there's even more to do. We get this one and get that one. And he can't keep up. And eventually he loses himself. And he enters the large machinery of production, loses his individuality, and becomes just another cog in the wheel of the company, just another cog in the wheel of performance. And so that's the world our founders were working into, just coming out of the Depression. We ask ourselves the question, why do we need OD? We need OD because of those jobs. We need OD because of this job. This is a real life picture. We need OD because of this. We need OD because of this. These are the reasons why we need OD and why the future that we need to work in is important. Today, when you think about OD in modern times, it does feel for a lot of people in the world like they are just jumping through the hoops and trying to manage time and cheat time and borrow this and borrow that, and so many jobs and so many functions and so many roles and so many children and so many school buses and so many bosses and so many shifts and so many locations and so much problem with my automobile that the world feels a lot like this. Mm-hmm. So we step back a little bit and we ask the question, what is OD really about? OD is about the intersection of the individual and the social system. OD is about how the social system impacts the individual and how the individual impacts the social system. This is the essence of Kurt Lewin's curiosity when he was doing his research in the 30s and 40s. He was very interested in how organizations and society influence individual behavior and how individuals influence society. So we try to come up with some language to describe what is OD actually. I'm going to offer you two definitions of what OD is here. This is kind of the classic Beckard definition. I think it was good and strong and accurate given the world that we understood in 1969. OD is an effort that is 1, planned, 2, organization-wide. 3, managed from the top. To 4, increase organization effectiveness and health through planned interventions in the organization's processes using behavioral science knowledge. Now, that's pretty good. Out of date, probably not reflective of a lot of the work that we in the field do, but it's pretty good. So I want to offer you an alternative definition that OD is a body of knowledge and practice. It's a body of what we know and what we do that enhance organizational performance and individual development. So we could actually stop right there. It's a body of knowledge and practice that enhances organization performance and individual development. If we continued, how do we do it? By increasing the alignment among the various systems within the overall system. So I would take that as kind of the kernel of a good, strong current OD definition. I would say OD interventions are inclusive methodologies and approaches to strategic planning and org design and culture change. And I mean, you could put a whole bunch of variables down here. I was just in China and doing some teaching on this topic and got a lot of pushback on the whole concept of work-life balance in Shanghai anyway, because everybody just accepts what they call the 9-9-6 work world. And that is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. But I think work-life balance is central to who we are in OD and central to what we do, helping the individual shape the organization, even when it comes to something as foundational as that. So I want to pause here and just invite you in via the chat box. Do you see the world of work as grimly as they're depicted here in these two videos, the Lucy and the Charlie Chaplin clips? And what's your reaction to these two definitions of OD?
So Stan says work-life integration is replacing work-life balance.
I think that's true, certainly for us who are externals, and the boundary between work and not work, I think, is quite mixed up. People who actually... No, go ahead.
Zach is wondering if you would go back a slide and show the definition again.
Sure.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rob says, great analogy and definitions aligning people with the systems.
Good.
There were several comments on your mission.
Oh,
and,
okay.
What a great mission it is.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the good news is after 35 years, you get really clear about the few really essentially important things. Mm-hmm. And, Kimberly was reading all the things that I can do and all the things I've done. And frankly, I don't do most of those much anywhere at all now. Most of what I'm doing is these kinds of sessions, teaching university, and then I have 3 or 4 large projects, 16, 18, 24, 36-month projects, a couple clients I've been working with for 3 or 4 years on big strategy projects. Mm. And the cool thing about that is I get to work with, I bring in former students and young people who do the BPR work and do the focus group work while I'm kind of working with the directors and the VPs and the owners.
So Julie has said, even though the Lucy and Charlie videos are a little dated, it prompted her to think about how work is often meeting to meeting and no breathing space in between. Correct. No time to think about what happened at the last meeting. Too bad, isn't it?
Well, in that kind of meat grinder, you do feel like Charlie Chaplin being kind of sucked into the internal workings of the machine with no regard for who you are, with no regard for who you are as a person, with no regard to what you bring to this. So even though the means of our destruction is not quite as mechanical as depicted in Charlie Chaplin's video, we get on the treadmill in the workplace, and I'm in a client office right now, and I'm watching people zoom past because it's urgently important that they get things done. I think the systems are punitive. Systems are they are selfish, and they want all of us, all of our time. And finding that work-life boundary is a real challenge in today's world, much more so than I think it was in the 60s and 70s when Peckard was doing his writing.
Matt, there's just a couple more I would like to share.
Yeah.
Our friend Paul says, I like the definition. It is similar to the definition by Worley and Jameson, but with more of an emphasis on systems and includes examples.
Yes, thank you. And I'm reading Linda's message here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just agreed with you, Linda, that it's not a factory cog machine, but it's a social cog machine, and it is just as addictive, just as absorbing, just has the exact same kind of qualities as the Charlie Chaplin video. Okay, should we continue?
Sure. Could I share one little story?
Yeah, please.
So I teach as well, and a while back I was teaching a night class, and people were on the expressway, and it was kind of frantic getting there, and so we did 2 minutes of focus. Just breathing and making sure we were present in the space.
Yep.
And I gave them an option if they wanted to continue doing that, and they said yes, of course. And probably about halfway through the semester, a mom came up to me and she said, I just want you to know that's my only 2 minutes in the whole day.
Oh my God, that just breaks my heart to hear that.
She said, I leave work, I go home, I throw food on the table, I run to class, and here I am. And I was like, oh, yeah, it broke my heart too. So.
Yep. I'm totally with you on that. And one of our earlier comments talked about the impact of artificial intelligence, and who knows what implications that has for our work. So let me. I don't want to seem to advance here. There we go. So here's kind of one view of OD. Kind of we're out there with the Sisyphean task of trying to beat back the bureaucracy. And we keep running into the bureaucracy of all things. And here's another one. And that is, well, he did promise to change the corporate culture. And there is kind of a sense that, we have some magic powers, or we're some type of shaman who can do a voodoo dance and make things better. I'm in the middle of a coaching engagement right now with a client who's been a leadership and managerial mess. And I arrived, confronted him hard on the first day, and his behavior changed instantaneously. And people are giving me credit as if somehow I did it. And I keep saying, but he's the guy who's done it. So I do feel every now and then I get stuck on this pedestal here, and absolutely am not deserving of it. So some of the great dualities that I think we have to deal with in our field have to do with the duality between capital and labor. That's a long-standing, if you go back and read Karl Marx, that very duality is right at the center of his writing here. And I think today it's, particularly in this country, it's alive and well and widely and badly felt by many. There's a duality between what we know and what we do. Of course, a duality between freedom and control, and finite and infinite. To what extent are we thinking beyond today into tomorrow? And duality between constancy and change, and science and spiritualism. At some level, maybe these shouldn't be either or, but the world treats them as if it's either or. Mm-hmm. And so we're stuck trying to navigate the ping pong between the both. There's a duality between absolutism and relativism. We see that in our own worldviews and in the research that people undertake in their doctoral programs. A duality between individualism and collectivism, and between diagnostic and dialogic OD. And that's a big deal. and then at a very basic level between Android and Apple. So there are lots of these things in our world. But the one I want to focus on for this very second is the duality between HR and OD. We have, I think, had very, I will call them ambiguous boundaries between these two functions. And I want to make the argument that they're really different and that the organization needs to treat them really differently than the organization is treating them today. I did some writing on this some while ago in the OD Practitioner called OD and HR, Do We Want the Lady or the Tiger? And in it, I discovered a quotation from the early 1960s. This was Herb Shepard and a couple of the other early founders, trying to decide, does OD belong in the president's office or does OD belong in the training department? Because in those years, OD was T groups in the training department. OD, we didn't have tools around business process reinnovation, and didn't have tools around team building, didn't have tools around strategy, didn't really have tools around anything except group process. And so most of the people who were doing OD were doing T groups in the leadership development functions in their organizations. And so there was a huge debate at the time, and I cited in this article, between people who thought that OD belonged in the training function where it could keep its head down and didn't draw attention to itself and didn't have to fight for budget and didn't have to play the politics of the organization, versus those who said OD belongs at the top of the organization, in the CEO's office, in the COO's office, needs to be at the table, needs to play the politics, and if it can't defend its budget, then it needs to get itself out of business. And so this tension between exposure and not exposure, this tension between how we are and where we are, this tension between should we be in the top of the organization or should we be buried in HR, has a long-standing history here. And even to this day, we are not doing a great job of resolving it. So I want to just talk about what I see as some of the difference in the functions. So I think the job of human resources is to recruit, retain, and develop, and to provide for staff well-being and employee relations, and to do workload planning and workload management and workforce planning, and to minimize labor costs and avoid litigation and enforce corporate policies and ensure compliance, reduce disruption and irregularity. So in other words, manage compliance, avoid risks, and reduce the payroll. I mean, at its core, that is the center of the role of the HR function. Now, some of you from HR are going to want to argue with me, and that's fine. Let's have that conversation. But I want to differentiate that with what I think is the better role for the OD function. Our role is to improve the effectiveness of the organization and to maximize the potential of human beings and their contributions to the organization, and to align strategy, structure, business process, and behavior into an effective corporate culture, and to embed humanistic values into the workplace, and to create change and disruption that supports the organization. So in other words, our job is to expand capacity and to create experiments and to take risks. Quite a contrast to the way the human resource function, I think, is structured. So the OD function is a risk-taking, capacity expanding function. The HR function is a compliance and risk aversion function. So I'm imagining there's lots of reactions to that. So let's just have a conversation about that. Do these distinctions resonate with you, and what would you add or subtract from them?
Matt, I clicked on to see the title of the article, and yes. I can't get my screen back. Oh, that's funny.
That's weird, Kim.
Yeah, I know, isn't it? So I'm working on it.
Yeah, okay. Try refreshing, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to read the comments. So
I got it.
Okay, good.
I really liked, I think it was Linda who said, you know, OD saying they don't want to deal with politics is like people saying they don't want air.
Well, I got to tell you, my master's students tend to be 26 to 46. And the younger ones are in these programs because they want to hide out. They don't want, and they want to facilitate team building. They want to stand at their flip charts and have their smelly markers and really keep their heads down. The older ones tend to have a more mature perspective on that.
Stan says OD belongs in the CEO role and or the office and not as a subsection of HR.
Correct.
Where it has been relegated.
That's the right answer, Stan. But I want to hear from somebody who disagrees. Because I'm going to argue a little bit. Yes, I think they do have OD and HR, Linda, and that's part of the problem. I think OD is sub-optimized in HR. OD is made to play by the same rules that the HR function needs to play with. And how are we supposed to work across the organization when the rules of the HR function require the HR VP to join us in all meetings with VPs? That's a true case story that I write about in my article. It brought the OD function to a grinding halt because the HR business partners complained to the HR VP that the OD people could go in and talk to a VP without the HR VP. And so the HR VP said, oh, okay, fine, OD people, I've got to go with you. And as you all know in our work, timing is the essence and is irreplaceable, and somehow a conversation with the VP that needs to take place tomorrow gets deferred 3 weeks to get into the HR VP's calendar because of rules.
Matt, can you speak more to that last point about OD people being able to step into the VP's office versus HR? What are you seeing, or what have you seen in your own experience around that particular issue?
So that's an example of the larger disconnect that I see, which comes back to, let me just return to this slide here, which comes back to when the HR function's job is to reduce the payroll and manage compliance. How do we get the most people to work for the least money? Okay, how do we manage compliance and make sure people don't break the rules? Okay, and how do we avoid risks? I think that's a fundamentally different mission than ours, which is to take risks and expand capacity and to create experiments and maybe break some china along the way. And so that the anecdote about the HRVP taking control of the way the OD people operate is the perfect example of living on the left side when in fact the function requires us to behave on the right side. And I've got several other examples of that in the article as well. But that's the essence of it, Quang. It's how do you create a risk-taking function in a risk avoidance function? How do you create the capacity to expand capacity in the very place that wants to reduce risk, reduce the payroll, and manage compliance?
Matt, somebody said, and I can't see it right now, we have so many chats going on, but somebody said ultimately it is an unholy alliance. I think that's a good way to put it. Oh, that's hilarious.
That's a good way to put it. Yep. Somebody asks, and I named some companies that actually work with a separate OD function, separate from HR. Is that your question, Barbara? Yes. Yes. I think there are a few. I'm thinking of Alan Church's role at PepsiCo. Alan's a PhD researcher. Kimberly, you were probably there a couple of years ago at Benedictine when Alan and I were on a panel where we talked about this very topic. And And so his function is differentiated from the HR function. I think he may be, I'm not sure where in the organization he's located, but it's not in HR. So that is one example. I wish I had more. Sadly, I don't.
And I do like what Linda says about we do need to teach OD folks how to coexist with HR.
I agree.
Yeah.
But coexist and partner, yes.
Yes.
But get in bed with, I would push back on.
Yeah.
I'll just say one other sentence about that, and that is part of my mission is to reduce the gap between the human condition and human potential. And so in every system I enter, I always ask for an HR business partner to work with me because they know the organization particularly well, but likely don't know the OD skills as well. And so I always try to find the thought leaders or the high potential people who could use some experience and exposure to these kinds of things. And so if I don't have someone like that to partner with me, I'm not building capacity in the system. I'm not helping to reduce the gap between human potential and the human condition. So yes, we need to know how to partner with the HR function, and I cannot imagine doing my work without that. What about human potential aided by AI? Boy, I don't know the answer to that, Stan. I'm doing some work on that right now with a futurist named Margaret Regan. She's keynoting a conference we're planning in Baltimore in December, and she's got some scary things to say about what AI is going to do to us as humans and to society in general. So I don't really have a good answer to that. So I'm going to, yeah, last one.
Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to do a quick time check. It is 12:37.
Good, yes. So I want to move on to the next piece here. Julie, I'm assuming you're asking that of the chatters because I don't think I said it was condescending. All right, so looking forward, here's some interesting data here. This is from the World Economic Forum, the Davos Forum, and notice the jobs that are emerging in the top 10 by 2022. 6 or 7 of them are IT jobs, but look at number 9 here, organization development specialists. Now, I'm not exactly sure that they define OD the way we do, but that's a big spot to have in a big scientific study. Jobs that are declining, data entry, accounting, these are all machinable. These are all automatable jobs. But the ones at the top are the ones that demand human interaction, and I take particular pride in number 9. Looking from the founders to the future, I want to see if I can propose a plausible list of OD values here. That are OD values for the 21st century, for the world that we live in today, might be something like empowerment, helping everyone increase autonomy and transparency, and collaboration between the client and the consultant and in the rest of the system, and respect and inclusion, having to do with equitably values the perspective and the opinions of everybody in the system, and authenticity, which touches on this topic of use of self, authenticity for ourselves and for the client in the system, and for self-awareness, ongoing personal and professional development. Got a bunch of slides here that kind of detail some of these. I'll just do 1 or 2 for you. The original belief I think we've had about empowerment is that jobs should be interesting and intrinsically rewarding. Employees have a right to decide about their workplace and how they do their work. Maybe a better belief. Taken to its extreme, I think one of the ways we've limited ourselves in OD is we always tend to side with the staff against management, and we dismiss the role of legitimate authority in the system. So a better belief would be we could believe that jobs should be interesting and intrinsically rewarding, and employees should have a say in their workplace. And so that would lead us to design and facilitate high engagement projects that acknowledge the serious trade-offs between the needs of the organization and those of the individual. Collaboration. So our original belief was that we should focus on what we have in common and not what separates us or divides us. But, taken to its extreme, we silence ourselves when we fear disagreement. We in OD silence ourselves when we fear disagreement, at the expense of asserting what we know or believe to be right or better, often to ensure the consulting engagement continues. So a better belief might be, we could believe that what we have in common gives us the strength to deeply explore what separates or divides us. And so we could use the trust and collaborative relationships with our clients as the foundation to tell the truth about our own personal thoughts and feelings, and to be honest about how and where we disagree with the client. So I think you guys are going to get these slides, so I don't have a huge need to kind of drill through the rest of them. But I just want to put the slides up here and have a conversation amongst ourselves now around what's your reaction to these proposed values, and what do you think might be missing?
There is so much conversation in the chat room, Matt. ABD02 talked about how important OD is in the healthcare industry right now. And, you know, there's so many mergers and acquisitions going on. So many nurses are set to retire. I think it's like 30% in the next 5 years. OD and HR need to work together really well in healthcare. Yes,
I totally agree with that. I want to come back to Linda's comment that I can see there. Peter Block works through HR all the time. He's external. I sometimes work through HR. I'm brought in by HR, but I want a client outside of HR. Linda, I'd argue with you that HR is the primary enabler of flawless consulting. I think the role conflicts between what HR is chartered to do and the kind of work that we in OD should be doing are too great. But half, maybe 3/4 of the work that I do, I've been approached from HR, and when we have the contracting conversation, I always say I need a client outside of HR. Unless the intervention is in HR. But if the intervention is in the larger system, I need a client outside of HR, because HR just doesn't have the leverage to do a culture change project, for instance.
STA is saying OD is growing in Asia at a rapid pace.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just in China, keynoted a conference in Shanghai on exactly this topic. And I think that's true. Unfortunately, the educational infrastructure is not there. And I'm not suggesting everybody get master's degrees, but there need to be some solid OD certificates in Asia that people like the NTL certificate used to be, and that allow people to learn the skills without having to invest in a master's program. So Paul asks about democracy. I think I'm seeing empowerment as today's version of democracy.
Barbara says technology needs humanism to build workplaces, the workplaces of the future. OD needs to be far more inclusive in incorporating diversity into it.
Well, I think that's why the fourth value here is respect and inclusion, equitably valuing the perspectives and opinions of everyone.
One thing that I've been reminded of lately is, you know, while inclusion is our ultimate goal, sometimes we need to reconcile some dilemmas along the way to create a more inclusive environment.
So just another sentence about that, Kimberly.
Yeah. You know, sometimes we're just so focused on the PC culture that sometimes we really need to work and look at some of these root causes and reconcile some of the dilemmas in order to create that environment, that ultimate environment of inclusion.
Right.
It can't be superficial.
Yes, I'm totally with you on that. Too many organizations task a business partner to go set up some, what do they call them, affinity groups or working groups, or I forget what the current term is, but employee resource groups, and figure that that's the solution to the diversity issue, and it's not even close.
And Barbridge says unconscious biases are pervasive in all of us, and they are.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Zach's comment about the CHRO is OD-minded and allows for increased access and success for OD interventions. I think that's great. Certainly one of the things that's happened over the last 20 years is HR directors and VPs have become much more business-oriented. They've become better educated. Many of them have MBA degrees. And the reason they want the OD function is because they realize its potential as a change agent. But unfortunately, I haven't run across enough of those guys like the CHRO that you're citing there, Zach, to generalize that it's a good idea. Thank you, Roland. It's nice to see you here, though. How would anybody know who you are? STA.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So a couple more thoughts here before we run out of time, and that is so what do we do for our own future? We think about the field. We look forward. My first advice is that we should always be working on the system, not in the system. And I say this to my clients all the time. We should be working on the system, not in the system. We need to reclaim strategy development and structure and org design and business process simplification as the higher order variables that then lead us toward and I would say the higher leverage variables, which lead us toward the job design issues, which we don't do enough of in our field, and the creativity issues, and the team building issues, and the workplace process issues. So I would hope that as a field, we own the fact that we have the best process for developing strategy and structure and org design and business process simplification. I would hope we would reclaim OD from the HR function and move from the margin to the center of systems. A couple more thoughts on this topic. We need to prepare ourselves better for the infinite world and for all of the challenges ahead. And we need to overcome our rugged individualism and counterdependence. One of the things that characterizes OD people, try facilitating a group of OD people. Okay, it cannot be done. And that is because we are counterdependent and we are so individualistic. And while that's a lovable trait in ones and twos, when you start to think about the field as a whole, we are unorganizable. And that has defeated our capacity to have a large impact on the world. We are, our founders labeled the organization development network a network. Well, one of the least powerful organizational forms is a network. And so I'm glad to see ISODC organized in a different way than the network structure that our founders left us for the OD network. I think we need to erase the boundaries between OD and change management. That is a stupid fight. We need to knit the regional networks into one coherent whole, and we need to integrate all of us. I mean, ACMP, ISODC, IOTA, the Asia OD Network, Japan OD Networks, the National OD Network. As long as we are fragmented and fractured like that, we are undermining our effectiveness. So what's my advice to you? My advice to you is jump in. My advice to you is just jump in and see what the water's like. Because until you get yourself wet, until you see what the water's like, until you try it out and do a small little piece for a church, or take on something for a nonprofit or the local Girl Scout troop, or organize the librarians, or do some work with the social workers, until we organize ourselves and jump in, we never really get around to being our full selves. And so that's the life I want to be. That's who I want to be. I want to be that person who is paddling at 1,000% and stunned and surprised and thrilled with what the world is offering her and us in OD. So some other things for your future. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way here. Sorry. Some other things for our future and your future. Your iOS ODC membership includes the OD Journal, newsletters, webinars, events like this, conferences, special student opportunities to sharpen your skills, and this is the best, the network of faculty and scholars and practitioners is, I've not found that anywhere else except here in ISODC. So if you're not a member, join and get yourself involved. If you are a member, make the best use of your membership. I hope you would consider joining the OD Network. Its quarterly journal has been the OD practitioner since 1968. They're just changing the title to the OD Review. The network offers members-only webinars and discounts to the annual conference, which just took place last month in Northern Virginia. And it has the only OD-only job exchange. Join your local chapter of whatever it happens to be, OD Network or San Francisco or Chesapeake Bay or the Good Network in Orlando. And finally, attend conferences. ISODC has some great events. The network, make sure you get to the academy at least once a year. The regional academies are quite cool. And I want to recommend the Organization Design Forum as well. These are principally STS people, socio-technical systems people, who are really good at having that perspective. Finally, I hope your professors somewhere are encouraging you to read the Handbook for Strategic HR. I was thrilled to be one of the members here of the editing team. These are all articles that we culled from the history of the OD Network's OD practitioner. And the first writings of Ed Schein and Richard Beckhart and Larry Greiner and the scholars in our field, plus a lot of good work on contemporary issues like diversity and inclusion. One thing you'll find there when you get to the OD Network is the Global OD Practice Framework. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is there, and it's only a year or two old, and it gives you some guidance about some things that you might think about in the field. Watch for our use of self process model in the January OD Journal. It describes the way we interact with ourselves and others in the world, using the basic structure of the team performance model, because both my colleague Russ Forrester and I are both students of Arthur M. Young and his theory of process. So I'm not going to spend any time on this, but this is a little preview of what you'll see in the OD Journal, which comes out in January. And those of you who know the team performance model, you'll recognize this as having the same basic dynamics. In the end here, I want you to be Spock. Pay attention to this. Actually, I'll show you the next one. This is from the Wrath of Khan 2.
Well done, Scotty.
Jim, I think you better get down here.
Bones?
Better. Hurry.
Savick, take the car.
No! They'll flood the whole compartment. Time. He's dead already. It's too late. Spock! Out of danger. Yes. Don't breathe. It's logical. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Or the one.
And that's who I think we want to be in the end. I think we want to be paying attention to the needs of the many over the needs of the one. And when we can focus on that, I think it's easier for us to live into our values. It's easier for us to become our full selves and to create the kind of world that we want to see, reducing the distance between the human condition and human potential. So let me finish there and see if there are any last questions in our last couple of minutes.
Yes, it was a really great discussion.
Yes, I agree. Your questions have been great, everybody. Thanks.
I would like to invite everybody to our January webinar.
Hey, let me get that up. You want to see that slide?
Oh, sure.
I think I've got it.
It's with Brenda Klein Reynolds, and she will be sharing with us on how to lead with clarity and confidence in uncertain times. I think that fits today well, doesn't it? You can register at isodc.org for that webinar.
Oh, there we go.
Yep. And here are a couple of additional resources as well.
And
yep, there we go.
You've got that detail on January 24th.
And I just want to thank Matt. I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Quang. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I feel certainly like I've been fed, and I've been given a lot to think about and ponder, and I appreciate that.
Been my pleasure. Thanks very much for the invitation and the opportunity. It's great to have so many people in this conversation about the things that I think are really essential to our field and our future and the future of the world. So thanks.
Everyone who's registered, we will get the link out to replay the webinar and also the article that Matt referenced. And if you're willing to share your slides, that would be wonderful too, Matt.
By all means.
Okay. All right.
Very good. Well, thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate the invitation, and thanks for the good conversations.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.